Good morning, everybody. Happy hump day to you on this Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. I have all of your stories for your rush hour ride to work. And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the New York City primaries for the mayoral race. A real David versus Goliath moment went down last night. And I just so happen to be in New York City, and I've been caught up in this real wild story. Even if you don't follow politics or political stuff going on in New York, this is going to affect everybody as the blueprint is being written for sort of the tone of how America wants to move forward. This is an important conversation to have. So we'll get into that. Plus, we've got Joe Rogan interviewing Bernie Sanders. A lot of politics on this morning episode. But of course, Joe Rogan, a supporter of Donald Trump's, seemingly would be also voting for Bernie Sanders, a complete opposite sort of on the political spectrum. I'll kind of break down why. I've got my theories. And then there are reports coming in that the bombs that went off in the mountainside in Iran actually didn't have that much effect on the nuclear program, even though Trump's calling this bogus. Folks are saying, hey, it's only going to really delay them a month or two. And then we've got Candace Owens actually speaking out against Donald Trump after endorsing him. She can get in line with Marjorie Taylor Greene and maybe even Joe Rogan, although I'm not too sure if he's been flipped. So those stories, plus we'll talk ICE, a lot to get into. It all starts right now on The Rush. And I started following this race just a few weeks ago. Zohran Mamdani, a Muslim immigrant and a longtime resident of New York City, is the projected winner of the mayoral primary in New York City. This is an absolute wild story. As of recent, he's been endorsed by AOC and Bernie Sanders. But what makes this so interesting is that he was going up against Chris Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, one of the Cuomos, going up against the Cuomo empire here. And so I'm going to share, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Did I say Chris Cuomo? It's the Cuomos are all over the place. But I'm going to share the former Governor Andrew Cuomo conceding the Democratic mayoral primary in a minute. Now, of course, he conceded this to Zohran Mamdani, who was an assembly member, and there's criticism over whether or not he had the experience. But of course, Andrew Cuomo left the, governor of New York, in disgrace, as he was credibly accused of a bunch of creepy behavior by, staffers and things like that. He was the son of a governor. And I think folks just want to change. They want young blood, right? They want new, exciting ideas. And so we're going to get into this right now. People are talking. Dan Pfeiffer of the Pod Save America crew said what's happening in New York City is a blaringly loud message to those in the Dem establishment who still cling to old politics, recite focus group talking points, and are too afraid to say what needs to be said. We have a lot to learn from Zohran Mamdani and his campaign. So I watched the Democratic Party primary here for the mayoral race, and Mamdani just wiped the floor with Andrew Cuomo. I mean, just tore him to pieces and really struck a chord with people. Just a few weeks ago, he basically was not polling, right? He only had a few percentage points of people that were voting for him in the polls. And then as of the race yesterday, it was kind of neck and neck, and now it's just absolutely a crushing defeat. So according to the results, as they continue to come in, Mamdani had almost 44% of the vote to Andrew Cuomo's 36%. Now, this might not seem like a lot, but there's a handful of other people in this race. So for him to be up by that many, and it's also ranked choice voting. Now, ranked choice voting is a voting system that I'm hoping the rest of the country goes to. Look at it this way. Imagine wanting to order food from a menu at Applebee's. And the old school way is like either you get the food you love, the steak, or maybe it's like something you hate, asparagus. And there's not, you either get what you love or you get the thing you hate, nothing in between. Ranked choice would be like, well, I'd love steak, but if I can't have that, I'd love to do a hamburger. If I can't have that, let's do the fried chicken. And you rank which one you would like. That way it's not just all or nothing. So a lot of people that were voting for Zohran Mamdani were also voting for Brad Lander. As you might remember, Brad Lander was arrested just last week or 2 weeks ago as he was trying to help out some of the folks that were getting, rounded up by ICE, and they accused him of assault. They ended up releasing him, and I don't think they pressed any charges, but absolutely wild stuff. Here, I've got a few clips to share. Here is a clip with Mamdani speaking to AOC. Like I said before, she endorsed him. And boy, there is a coalition and a momentum that is coming to our country. And by the way, if you're on a different side of the political ideology and you don't understand what's happening, there's different terms that people use to describe themselves. He says a democratic socialist. That's a term, Bernie Sanders uses. I prefer progressive. I think the term socialist has kind of been warped and twisted by so many, even though it really just describes people pooling their money together for services like, roads and police officers and things like that. His sort of campaign was to raise a few percentage points on the taxes of the ultra wealthy, those making over $1 million, raise corporate taxes in New York City so that it's the same level as New Jersey, like very simple things. But, he'll take that extra money that comes in, put it towards, not just having the police take care of all of the mental health issues that are out there, but having caseworkers. I mean, really reasonable stuff. Here's what AOC had to say.
I know how it felt on that last day, like right before the results in my first race. And just as a person, like soaking up every minute leading up to this is really important.
You've blazed the trail that we can walk on. There's this childcare worker who came up to me in Sunnyside, and she told me, I never used to think of myself as a progressive. And then I looked at Bernie and I looked at AOC and I realized these are the only people that are fighting. Mm-hmm. And I think that's this moment of realization for so many New Yorkers who don't have the same language of how they describe their politics. They don't have the same language of defining themselves in a specific strain. And yet the most important thing is, are you actually willing to fight for the
Are you willing to fight for the things that you believe in? And, AOC's got one of those names that people either love her or they hate her. Although I suspect those that hate her don't know much about her. They're just kind of sort of like told to hate her because she's part of this thing. But, when you hear the message of these people, they speak to the middle class. They speak to the lower class. They speak to helping people get rid of some of that wealth inequality. Bernie Sanders says congrats to Zohran Mamdani and his thousands of grassroots supporters for their extraordinary campaign. You took on the political, economic, and media establishment, and you beat them. Now it's on to victory in the general election. Yeah, I think victory is all but certain in the general. I think this was kind of the big one here. But yeah, pretty wild stuff. Here on ABC 7 New York, they sort of explain the strategy about ranked choice voting and why Mamdani, even though basically they don't call the election officially unless you're over 50%, and that's very hard to do with these many people in the race. But here's what they have to say.
So right now we're talking about the votes that have come in. Right now, 82% expected votes are in. And look at this. Zohran Mamdani has 44%, Cuomo with 36%. And now we are actually questioning, is there a path forward for Cuomo?
Well, it was interesting because, so much was made about this cross-endorsement between Mamdani and Lander, but frankly, they share a lot of the same supporters, both targeting Andrew Cuomo. And as the ranked choice plays out and you start to filter through the candidates, assuming that Mamdani does not reach that over 50% threshold tonight, which is still a possibility. As you mentioned, 18%, now 16% of the expected vote left, and you can see how the numbers are changing.
So he's probably not going to get that high as far as we're recording. But what did happen just moments ago is that Andrew Cuomo has conceded. Here was his speech and what he had to say.
That was all enjoyable, and I'm very proud of the campaign that we ran, and I'm proud of the effort that we put forth, and I'm proud of the issues that we discussed. But tonight was not our night. Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night, and he put together a great campaign, and he touched young people and inspired them and moved.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with Andrew Cuomo, is that he touched young people, but not metaphorically. No, allegedly. What do I know?
Them and got them to come out and vote. And he really ran a highly impactful campaign. I called him, I congratulated him, I applaud him sincerely for his effort, and let's give him a round of applause and thank him for his campaign.
Wow, this is incredible. Seeing Andrew Cuomo kind of restore a little bit of dignity in the political world. Would you have seen this from Donald Trump? Now, we of course know when Biden beat Donald Trump, he never actually conceded, right, the election. He said, no, it was all rigged, this and that. And it's like, well, it wasn't. And in this case, neither was this. Cuomo got dealt an ass whooping. Okay, coming up next, I'm going to share some thoughts from some celebrities, or at least one specific celebrity, and a message she has since deleted. Deborah Messing posted, then deleted this hours later. It has not aged well. A racist post calling New York City mayoral candidate Zohan Mamdani a pro-jihad extremist. So the post, she shared it, which again, a share, I'm not saying a share is an endorsement, but when it's something racist like this, it might as well be. And the post said, first, the jihadists came for us on 9/11. Now they're hoping to capture City Hall. Pro-jihad extremist Zohran Mamdani, who praised the October 7th terrorist attack, supports globalizing the Intifada, and doesn't think Israel has a right to exist, is running to be mayor of the most Jewish city outside of Israel. Now, this isn't true. It's just frankly not true. But isn't this wild to see that somebody like Deborah Messing, a relatively A-list celebrity, would share something like this? She posted, is New York City, the city which suffered the worst jihadist terrorist attack in history, about to elect a pro-jihad mayor? Well, I would say no, they're about to elect Mamdani. But again, this is absolutely wild. So she deleted this, but it's just crazy to think. You hear about trolls online having certain takes, but to think someone would have this take about a guy who's lived in New York pretty much his entire life as an immigrant, moved here at a young age, and has this real powerful message she's trying to share, and they're trying to just water it down with racism. Here is an interesting thought as well about his experience being questioned. Have a listen.
The Daily News, as did the New York Post. So anybody who knows how bad New York can get all came out against Mamdani because a 33-year-old with zero experience running anything except a little office with 5 employees should not be running the city of New York.
Donald Trump is president of the United States. His experience was being on The Apprentice. He's head of the Pentagon. His experience was being a weekend anchor on Fox. Are you kidding me? He's got Dr. Oz is in his administration. Dr. Oz,
you're leaving out something.
Me?
He's a 33-year-old socialist who's never run a popsicle stand.
He's literally in city government right now. Sorry. After Donald Trump, I'm sorry, after Donald Trump and his Pinky and the Brain administration, no one ever gets to talk about qualifications
Socialism
again.
will not save the
bottom line is, I want to ask you a question. What is your evidence that Mamdani would return New York City to the 1970s hellhole Times Square? What is your evidence of that?
It's very simple. So he wants to raise taxes on people who make the most money. What eventually is going to
2% on those that make over $1 million.
Happen is you're going to lose that tax base. Once you lose that tax base, our bonds will get degraded. Now the city budget will not be substantial enough to subsidize not only the cops but the fire department, the sanitation department. Once you start losing Wall Street and people who pay $11,000, $12,000.
And by the way, this is what's wrong with the thought process. they're so worried about losing those top earners. What about all of the people that have been forced to flee New York because they can't afford rent? What about them? And there are more of them than there are these top earners that he's there protecting. And again, will some people decide to leave the city? Maybe some will move to Hoboken and they can take the PATH train in. I'm not too sure, but absolutely wild stuff. All right, so let's do this. And by the way, there are reports, the Free Press reported this last week that someone said this would absolutely be a tipping point for a lot of companies and individuals, that being that they'll be leaving if Mamdani wins. Well, he is about to win. Fear among New York City business owners isn't just higher taxes or stricter regulations. It's that a democratic socialist with a history of railing against Wall Street could bring an adversarial ethos into City Hall. And by the way, that other guy that was arguing that we're going to live in this chaotic world, one of the things that Mamdani wants to do is have more money, not to defund the police, but to spend more money, less on the police overtime and more on healthcare officials, people that can deal with the mental health problem. Like, one of the biggest issues in New York City isn't crime, because there's, there is crime, of course, but a lot of it is mental health, people getting pushed in the subway tracks or homeless people stabbing, things like that. So those issues need to be dealt with, not necessarily by police, but by mental health officials who actually know how to handle somebody who's in that situation. So I don't know. I find it very interesting, and we'll have to see what this means for the rest of the country. Joe Rogan interviewed Bernie Sanders again for the second or maybe third time, had him on his podcast. Joe Rogan's been talking out about some of the chaos that's going on with the ICE raids, and here he kind of discusses, maybe Joe Rogan's having a little buyer's remorse. Have a listen.
MAGA thing right now is very divided, particularly because one of the things that they voted for was no war. Well, now it seems like we're in a war, right? So and it's quick. We're 6 months in, and that's already popped off. And then people are very concerned with now what happens to our troops overseas that are in these bases, that are in vulnerable positions. And
so at least Joe Rogan is able to admit, hey, not exactly living up to some of these campaign promises. And the amount of people that are getting arrested in some of these ICE raids, so many of which, I think they said 90% of them, either A, have never been arrested, or B, certainly not for any violent crimes. These are folks that are just trying to go about doing their job. A man was arrested at a Home Depot in Hollywood, and he was an American citizen.
The guy they arrested at the Home Depot in Hollywood, he was an American citizen, 37 years old, and they thought he was an undocumented immigrant who was just another day laborer at the Home Depot. And he was working at Home Depot, but getting his doctorate. And he was like, what the fuck are you doing? As you can see him, he's filming it. Also, the guy that they dragged away, sitting in his truck, smashing the window and then dragging him out. And then when the guy's filming it, then they tackle him. And then they're bragging about how many bodies do we get today? 31? Oh, that's amazing. We got 31 today. Trump's really riding us on this.
Yeah. So again, these issues that are coming up, yesterday we reported the mom who was disappeared, and her daughter, breastfeeding, won't take the bottle and has no mom there to breastfeed her. And then there's another story that just happened with another American whose spouse is going through the legal process, and they actually have to bring the 2-month-old baby to the detention center so that the baby can be breastfed by his mother, who's at a detention center. This is absolute insanity that's going on. Here's Candace Owens turning on Donald Trump.
Are you done with Donald Trump, or could you see a way that you would end up perhaps voting for him? Oh, he can't run again, obviously, but would you support him publicly again?
So I want to be clear. I don't regret voting for Donald Trump above Kamala. I think he was the better candidate. Certainly a better candidate above Joe Biden. But what I will say is that he's been a chronic disappointment. And I feel embarrassed that I told people to go vote for him because this wasn't going to happen, and it is happening. But I just think that the picture.
Pretty wild stuff. I mean, it's story after story of this. And again, I don't think, what's annoying to me is that a lot of these people that are turning on this movement, they don't care about the ICE detentions, the people getting their families ripped apart. Everyone's got a different thing that they care about, right? But all collectively, it adds up to not keeping up with his campaign promises. None of this making life cheaper for people. Doge was insignificant. The budget only skyrocketed for the military, right? The industrial complexes, it's just trillions of extra dollars in debt. So none of this is helping the American people. And it's really just adding more fear, divisiveness out there. So this whole, and also this meddling in these Middle Eastern wars right now, it's not even working. Here is an intelligence reporter saying, oh yeah, those bombs we dropped on Iran, yeah, it didn't really do much.
U.S. airstrikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities did not appear to destroy the country's nuclear program. That's according to an initial intelligence assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency. And that appears to contradict what President Donald Trump and many of his allies have claimed after the attack.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated.
One source familiar with the intelligence reporting said the nuclear program may have only been set back 3 to 6 months. And they also said that the damage may have not affected core elements of the nuclear program. But the White House is pushing back on these media reports, calling them, quote, flat out wrong. Still, even the highest ranking U.S. military officer has used more conservative language when describing the impact of the strikes.
Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
And the Director General of the UN's nuclear watchdog said no one, not even his own agency, was in a position to fully assess the underground damage to the facilities hit.
It's just wild. It's like they're really, the administration is more worried and focused on can we report victories to our people, right? Versus actually getting the victories. Where's the concept of a plan for healthcare? Where's the lowering of bread? Where's I know all of the different things. Where is it? But instead, we're going to drop bombs. Because they've got these nukes they're coming after us with. Again, no evidence that was happening. And now we're not talking about some of the other glaring issues within our country. We're only several months in, folks. So I understand this is a lot of information to take in. But I do believe, like the electricity in the air that turns into a lightning bolt, I believe that potential energy is going to lead to a catastrophic tidal wave of a movement against the current administration. People are going to be fed up if they aren't already. Enough is enough. It ain't working out. So that's it for us this morning. This afternoon, more entertainment news. I got a lot to cover, from Taylor Swift to Justin Baldoni. So stick around for that. Make sure you're subscribed. Double check that you are. It really helps make sure that you get the content as soon as I publish it. We'll see you then. I'm Dave, and this is The Rush.